All right, so today I'm going to talk about how we're going to code like it's 1999. If you guys want, I know you don't have interwebs, but for later on you can follow along. I've got a longer version of the slideshow here. So really briefly, who am I? Once upon a time I used to be a civil engineer, but I quickly became bored with the slow pace of the projects I was doing. So then I decided, what industry do I want to be in? I think I want to be in tech because it's super innovative, it's super fast-paced, and so I started working in this industry as a, quote, community specialist. In other words, I was doing customer support. So I totally hated it, and I taught myself to code. I would spend nights and weekends working on my side projects, going to hackathons, hack nights, things like that. And eventually, that led to success. And I landed a job as a web developer at HotPads, and I've been working there ever since. So here we go as a web developer. My first assignment at HotPads was to redesign all of our emails and to make them mobile friendly. And I was like, piece of cake, no big deal, right? Wrong. I quickly realized that I had no idea what I was doing. But fortunately, I'm here to share all of my strategies and my mistakes with all of you. So here's my story about how emails are evil. I'm going to talk a little bit about design, a bunch of things I learned before, during, and after my emails were released, and a bunch of resources that I found. So first up, a little bit about design. So the first thing I wanted to do was to redesign our welcome email, since that was kind of the punch in the face of our users. It's like, hey, come to our website, welcome. So what I did was I started researching other people's welcome emails. So I scoured my own email accounts. I started signing up for all of these different services just so I could look at their emails. A lot of the stuff is pretty instinctual, but I made a quick list. Oops. So my favorite email actually comes from Indiegogo. It's not a welcome email, but it's just really pretty. So let's take a look at Indiegogo. Wow, it's huge. Okay, so the first thing that I noticed about this email was like the huge top-anchored logo. Like, hey, this email is from Indiegogo, FYI. I noticed that they also have a lot of really great content. So you'll see lots of images, less text in general. Another great thing they do is all of their calls to action are this bright magenta. So you'll see URLs here in that color, and then all of these read more buttons. And that's consistent through the email. A couple of other things I noticed is they've got these social media icons, as well as the text down here, which is really great for accessibility. And then at the very, very bottom, of course, the unsubscribe and way to update your subscription preferences. I'm trying to switch tabs now. Whoops. Sorry about that. All right, let's go back to my slides. Or not. All right, everybody take a nap. I know we just had lunch, so.
That one?
Yep. Thank you. All right, so from that email and the bunches of emails I was looking at, I found a bunch of takeaways, and those are that you want to keep your emails text light, you want to keep them image heavy just to keep the interest of your users, have that huge top anchored logo so people know where your email is coming from. And then also you want to set a max width on your email. You don't want people reading across the screen just to see what you want to say. All right, so the next thing I wanted to take a look at was the emails that I'd be working with. So I did, and here's the welcome email from HotPads. I was like, oh my God. So a couple of things. First off, why is the logo right in the middle of the email? I don't know. Another thing you'll notice is the spacing is really inconsistent throughout the email. It doesn't really make any sense why things have the margins that they do. The last thing I noticed was, wait, where do you unsubscribe? If you're a user, the type of user who gets really annoyed at all of these emails pummeling your inbox, then you definitely want to be able to at least find that unsubscribe, no matter how hard it is to find. So basically, I was like Doug. I was like, wow. Okay, so that's what I'm working with. So the next thing I wanted to do in designing our emails was to plan on what I was making. And I had a couple of goals in mind. So the first was to bring a bunch of consistency to our emails. I took a look at all of our emails across Hotpads, and they were all different. Like the logo was in different places, there were different margins, different icons. So I was like, all right, let's bring some consistency to them. And in general, having that consistency will bring brand awareness. Again, seeing that top anchored logo over and over again will make sure that your brand is recognizable. So another thing I took a look at in my planning was a bunch of pre-made templates. I'm sure a bunch of you guys have seen all of those, and there are just lots of options, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And I actually didn't use any of them. The reason why was because I was redoing all of our emails. We have a pretty specific user base that uses Outlook a lot still. So I wanted to make sure I had something that was customizable. Also, being that this was the first project I did as a web developer, it was a learning experience for me, and I had a lot of time on my hands. So if you're a company that doesn't have the time, you could go with a template, but if you've got a lot of time and you need a customizable solution, then I'd recommend just building your own. The next thing I did was a bunch of sketches. So if I've learned anything from UX, it's that sketching is awesome. So you see here, I've actually sketched the same email 4 different times. And in general, when you do sketch, you will find that your later sketches are much better than the previous ones. So it's good to just do it over and over again. Another thing you can do in planning your design is if you've got the skills for Photoshop, I'd recommend it. It's great. You can have a quick mock-up. So you see here one of the earlier mock-ups of our welcome email that I did. Another thing to keep in mind is what I call the rule of thumbs. So minimum touchable area. I think a lot of people have heard the number 44 by 44 pixels. This is actually based on the original iPhone's human interface guidelines, which actually no longer exist. So wipe that number from your mind. Take a look at these links. You'll find a bunch of different minimum touchable areas for different devices. They vary quite a bit, so you probably want to take a look at the devices that your users have and then base it on the largest size. All right, so here's my template. This is the email I created from the original one. Again, you'll see the top anchored logo. You'll see the links are underlined for accessibility as well as colored differently. I changed a bunch of things for mobile and for social media so that you have images instead, and again with the text below for accessibility. It's a little bit hard to see, but below that in the footer I'm mimicking what Hotpad's website used to look like. It's the same footer, so people kind of see that consistency from the web onto the emails. So I like to say that it's an aesthetic that Prince would approve of. And just for reference, here's the original email and then the email that I designed. So you see the content is a little bit longer in my version, but I think it looks a whole lot better. And a lot of traffic shot through the roof after the redesign of this email. All right, on to code. A bunch of tips and tricks. So you can find my template on GitHub. It's just the general template that I created for the Hotpads emails. So why template? A great thing about having a template is that you can keep your code dry, so you're not repeating yourself. So you see in my email what we're calling our little microlisting. It's like the same little block of code just repeated over and over again. Again, you'll see the consistency in the Hotpads logo so that people know where your email is coming from, as well as the frame and the footer. So a little bit of abstraction goes a really long way. All right, some things that I learned before I started coding my emails. Tables are coming. Mozilla Developer Network says, note, prior to the creation of CSS, HTML table elements were often used as a method for page layout. This usage has since been discouraged, since HTML4, and the table element should not be used for layout purposes. Emails say lol to that. So one thing I found out was that tables do not display as inline or block. The default CSS for a table is to display as table. Probably makes sense. But one thing I found out is you'll actually want to specify your tables to display as block. Otherwise, Chrome is going to totally ignore your max width. Another thing I learned about were inline styles. You've got to use them because most email clients do not support a head section in your HTML page. There's a a page on Campaign Monitor letting you know what CSS is supported over different email clients. And also there are actually really great websites that will actually put your styles in line for you. So unfortunately, you're going to be doing a lot of this. You'll see all of my styles in line. It's a mess. But like I said, you've got those tools that can help you. Another thing is the max width. So you see here, I've got a really wide email that I received. So you're just going to be reading across the page. So just take a note from print design. You don't want people reading across the page. You want them to be able to scan with their eyes. So a good max width number to keep in mind is 550 to 600 pixels, and that's based on most email clients' preview panes. So a quick note about comments. You're going to have tables all the way down your page, tables within tables within tables for your email. So you take a quick look at the code up here. I've got a couple of comments letting me know when one table starts and one table ends. And it's a good thing to keep in mind, so use a lot of comments. All right, another thing to keep in mind are image alternatives. So it's really good to always have an alt attribute on your image tags or a background color set on them. It's really good for accessibility in case the email client isn't going to display your image. Oops. So you'll see here, Gmail is not displaying the HotPads logo. So by having that alt attribute, it's really helpful for users to see what they're missing out on, and if they want to click just to see the HotPads logo, that would be great. Another thing, again, accessibility. So below, you'll also see that I've set a background color on the footer of my email. Just in case that image at the bottom doesn't show, you'll still see this nice blue border surrounding the email. All right, some things I learned while I was coding. So media queries. We all love media queries, right? Maybe? Well, they're really great for things like readability and targeting specific devices. Again, this talk is about responsive emails. So here you'll see here that I've set a max width on the background table of my email for any device or browser that's much wider. Another thing you can do with media queries is use them in conjunction with fluid layouts and percentage-based widths. So you'll see here I'm targeting devices that have a max width of 480 pixels. And for any email clients that actually don't recognize media devices, I also have the table width set to 100%. So it's really good to use those in conjunction so you can hit all those different email clients. And a quick note about media queries. So when I was designing these emails, I actually focused on the browser first and then had them degrade over mobile. And that's just because our users mostly were accessing the emails on browser versus mobile devices. So it's a little bit hard to see here. It's cut off, but you guys can check out those slides later. All right, the next thing to keep in mind is, again, device pixel ratio for your media queries. So here I'm targeting all of the Retina or high-res devices, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, important. When should we use it? Most people say never, and for me and emails, I say sometimes. So important here, what you'll see is sometimes your inline styles will overwrite your media queries, and you don't always want that to happen. So for my mobile devices, I've set the header bar to be a height of 5 pixels, And for browser-based or like wider devices, I have the header bar set to 10 pixels. So you'll see the inline style will overwrite the media query. So in this case, having important there in the media query will make sure that the header bars stay small for mobile devices. All right, this one's a little bit weird. So the very bottom of this image, you'll see a thin blue line at the bottom of that footer. And I was like, what is that? Where did that come from? Why can't I make it go away? Well, it turns out it was a line height issue. So there are a couple of solutions that will resolve that for me. And one is to set a line height on the surrounding column element. The other is to set the image to display as block so it doesn't interact with those line heights. All right, lastly, things that I learned after the release of my emails. Whoops. So this one is super weird and only occurs occasionally, so occasionally that I don't even have an example of it. But once in a while, your image will appear with a thin gray border around it. And I was like, why is that happening? And it mostly only happened in Gmail. And I couldn't figure it out until I just tried something randomly. So it turns out the reason was because I had the image on a different line than my anchor element. So actually putting them inline got rid of that border. Don't ask me why. If you guys see a gray border around your images and emails, now you'll know that this is the solution. Another thing I noticed was my high-res images for Retina were not being sized down, so people were getting this email, which obviously is not going to make them want to go to our site. So I was like, okay, what do I do? Well, the problem is that Outlook 2007, 10, 13, and Outlook for Internet Explorer don't allow for HTML or CSS resizing of images. So I was like, ah, great, what do I do now? Well, the solution is to replace your image with a background image style on the surrounding column element, and then set the image to display as none. And I found that solution from Campaign Monitor. So see the code here. So up at the top, you'll see for my high-res devices that I've set a background image on that surrounding column element, and then I set the image to display as none. And you'll see the HTML down here. All right. Another thing I learned was that Outlook 2007, 2010, and 2013 ignore max width. So what you'll want to do here is have a max width bypass. So you'll set a fluid layout for your baseline elements. So you'll see here I set a width, fluid width of 100%. And then a media query for any screens that are larger than that to set a fixed width instead of a max width of 600 pixels. So you may be wondering, Outlook 2007, 10, and 13, WTF? Well, it turns out that the rendering engines for Outlook 2000 to 2003 is Internet Explorer. For 2007, 2010, and 2013, it's Microsoft Word. Yeah, and don't ask me why. Outlook 2011, they made the right move, and they used WebKit. They call it Outlook for Mac. So the rendering engine is awesome, but then I don't know why they switched back in 2013. All right, the last thing that I learned after the release of my email was that Gmail ignores any color styles on your anchor tags in the head of your HTML page. So you actually have to go and style every single anchor tag inline in your email. All right, now some quick resources. So I found all these really great blogs. Style Campaign is a company run by Anna Yeaman. You'll see in the background, it's kind of faint, but you'll see her device library. So she spends a ton of time on email and marketing. It's a really great blog, lots of solutions there. Litmus is a testing suite for emails. They also have a really great blog, and they take note of weirdnesses in the different outlooks. And I think everyone's pretty familiar with Campaign Monitor and MailChimp. Again, they have a really great blog, and they are both online marketing email solutions. All right, so off to the templates that I had mentioned earlier. So there's Zerb Inc., the same company that puts out Foundation. Again, Campaign Monitor and MailChimp have their own templates, which are really great. And then there's the HTML email boilerplate by Sean Powell. And don't know if you can see it, but it's in the background of this email, so, or of this slide. And you can see it gets a little bit complicated. So it definitely takes care of everything you need, but something to keep in mind, it's a lot of code. Another thing to keep in mind is I just found out that Zurb Inc. actually doesn't support Outlook 2007, 10, or 13. So they made these great templates, but they took the easy way. And then lastly, testing. So Email on Acid and Litmus are really great testing suites. Email on Acid is free. Litmus is not. Fortunately, the company I work for has a subscription with Litmus, and so you maybe see that in the background as well. But basically, you can send them an email, and they'll display what your email will look like across different email clients. And that's it. If you guys have any questions, you can speak to me later.